everybody, and welcome to a special edition of the Purity Pulse podcast, where we're going to have two different talks back to back, one on the tariffs and one on what was trendy in Anaheim. I'm Julie Drapeau, the Vice President of Sales and Marketing at Purity Life, and we will have some special guests today to help us out. But before, please note that if you have questions, we're going to review them. Just put them in the chat box or raise your hand. And at the end of the episode, we're going to unmute you and you'll be able to share with us live your questions. So without further ado, let me introduce our in-house tariffs expert, our president and CEO, Matthew James.
Thank you, Julie, for having me. Who knew I would learn so much about tariffs in the last 2 months? I really had very limited interaction with tariffs. Here and there, we dealt with a little bit. But it's been a whole-on immersive experience and education on tariffs and how they apply and the counter tariffs. So certainly interesting, but not the ideal situation for sure.
I still remember being at Purity at the office. It was in February, where I felt like the world just stopped suddenly. And we were just like standing still on what is this? What's going to be the impact on all of us? And how to deal with it. So can you just really at the top level explain to us what are the tariffs and the counter tariffs?
Sure, absolutely. Well, clearly it's been a highly fluid environment with information changing very rapidly as the new U.S. administration led by Donald Trump have decided to weaponize their economy. They have the largest economy in the world. 25% of the gross domestic product is controlled by the U.S., and they've decided to weaponize that to enhance their economy in theory and implemented a number of tariffs across a number of sectors that impact products that are going into the U.S. And the important thing for people to understand about tariffs is that the tariffs that apply, whether it's U.S. tariffs or Canadian counter tariffs, those are paid by the importers. So when Donald Trump implements tariffs or his administration tariffs for coming into the U.S., those importers in the U.S. are responsible for paying the tariffs. So the Americans pay tariffs on products coming into the U.S. The Canadian government has responded with counter tariffs, and those counter tariffs are paid by importers like Purity Life when those products come into Canada. And obviously, with the large tariffs of 25% that the Trump administration has put in place for those exporters to the U.S. and those importers of those exports that have to pay that 25%, the Canadian government has responded with a whole host of tariffs on very specific categories that impact the products that we distribute.
Yeah. And how long is that, how long do we have to pay that tax? I think that's a very important question, right?
Well, we don't know how long the tariffs are going to be in effect, but we do know the reality of what that means. And that means that with the tariffs that apply to the products that we import, we have to pay those tariffs within 25 or 30 days, of the products coming across the border. So if we're buying $100,000 of health and beauty products, we have to pay $25,000 to Canadian Border Services through our customs broker within 30 days. And that's often before we sell the product. And obviously 25%, that's a big impact on the retail price as it passes through the marketplace. I should probably give just an overview in terms of what the impact is and what the specific products are that are impacted at Purity Life, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because it's not all when we heard about the tariffs, everybody was like, oh my God, what is it going to be impacted? Because it's a counter tariff.
Correct.
That we applied that tax over what was coming through us.
Right.
So I know that there was a lot of back and forth. That list changed a couple of times. We did some adjustments. So what is right now those categories that are impacted?
Yeah, so certainly when the U.S. administration levied very large tariffs on aluminum and wood and a bunch of other things of 25%, the Canadian government responded with counter tariffs. And counter tariffs are based on very specific codes. They're a universal 6 code. The Canadian ones are an 8 code, so 8 digits, 10 characters. And it covers a whole host of categories. The ones that are specific to, say, the natural health category
Yeah.
and Purity Life
What's impact us?
that impact us is really skincare, soap and bath products, sun care, hair products, coffee, tea, spices, perfume, makeup, food storage, napkins, paper towel, dental floss, shaving. So those are the ones that primarily impact us.
Mm-hmm.
And to give people perspective, we're importing about 30% of the volume of sales that we do is imported from the U.S. So that's about $40 million. Of that $40 million, $20 million is impacted by the counter tariffs. Now, I'm just talking about the products and items that are specific to Purity Life.
Yeah.
For the food distributors, natural food distributors in Canada, they're impacted by cheese, milk, whey protein, citrus fruits, seed oils, meat, pasta, and that's just a high level. It's very detailed because it's all very SKU
Like
specific.
SKU, yeah.
And so it's important that for any of the distributors that are importing product, obviously they need to have the SKU specific tariff code and then run that against the counter tariffs and see if there's a match. And if there's a match, then when that product comes across the border, then you got to apply the 25% or pay the 25% to CBSA. So for us, that represents about it represents about 1,800 SKUs that are impacted. And of those 1,800, it's about 44 different brands that are impacted. And some of the top brands being impacted, Dr. Bronner's, Derma E, Earth Mama, Acura, Giovanni, just to name a few of the 44. And that's only of the products that we import, where we're a direct importer from the manufacturer. There are a number of U.S. brands that we're not the direct importer. The brands have their own warehouse set up in Canada, so we buy from that warehouse. So we had to tease that out as well to understand, okay, what are we buying from the U.S., what's coming from Canada, because we can apply the price increase related to the tariff to what we import,
Yes.
but then these other brands, they're going to be issuing price increases probably
Because
pretty
they have
shortly.
to absorb it themselves.
Correct.
Right.
And so there'll be more price increases beyond the 44 brands, 1,800 SKUs that we are implementing price increases on April 1st, because those are just coming down the pipe from these various U.S. manufacturers that have a warehouse here in Canada. So more to come on the price increases.
Yeah, and you've done a great job to help brands as well, because I remember when we got the list, you went into the details because some codes were originally deemed as being that counter tariffs, but then you research and they were not. So piece of caution maybe for some brands that are importing on their own, that they should check their books correctly.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, ChatGPT has been super helpful in identifying tariff codes correctly, because the tariff binders are these crazy binders like encyclopedias that you have to look up. Very archaic. They have them on the website too as PDFs, but very cumbersome to look through. But if you actually write in ChatGPT, hey, here's the product, this is what the ingredients are, if it has an NPN or not, what would be the tariff code for this item, and it'll actually give you the answer and give you some options as well. And so we went through SKU by SKU to validate the tariff codes, as well as some we actually argued against the broker, Wilson's, and were successful in saying, well, actually, it shouldn't be this tariff code. It actually should be this tariff code. And with that other tariff code, it means the counter tariffs didn't apply. So you really have to scrub at the SKU level to ensure that the tariff codes are accurate, because those are the ones that are going to be impacted as the product comes across the border. So, like I said at the onset of this discussion, I learned a lot about tariff codes in a very short
Got some
period.
gray hair at the same time.
Yes.
Love it.
Yes. And now there's been one round of counter tariffs.
Yeah.
Now there's a
more?
second round of counter tariffs. The second round of counter tariffs that were published don't impact us, because actually for some of the items we had similar or the same tariff code or counter tariff code applying, but actually the country of origin, which is a whole other thing that you have to understand as well. There are brands that we import from the U.S., but the actual country of origin is not the U.S. So like Weleda, as an example, is coming from Germany to the U.S. to Canada, but that that brand is not impacted by the counter tariffs because country of origin is not USA. So you need to know what the tariff code is. You need to know which country it ships from. You need to know what the country of origin is. All these things that we did not spend a lot of time on, but now we're spending a lot of time on truly understanding
Yeah.
what they are at the SKU level, so we know what's impacted. And so we've now published a list for retailers to look at that we're continuing to iterate on in
Yeah.
advance of the increases that are happening on April 1st, so people can see at the SKU level the impacted
Yeah.
brands, SKUs, and the categories those SKUs sit within, so they understand what's coming on April 1st in terms of the price increases.
The great thing that we've seen, though, for retailers that might be listening is there's many brands from the U.S. that, and that was it was kind of nice when we were in Anaheim. First of all, people were greeting us saying, "We're sorry, it's not us. We didn't want this." And then after, they really wanted to help the industry, so the 25% would not be seen or on shelf, and increasing the retail pricing, which would damage their brand basically. So we've encountered a lot of that, so that's very helpful. So again, for those who are watching, there's many brands that are working with us, and Purity is also participating to really decrease the impact for consumers.
No, absolutely. It was definitely an interesting show at Expo West. It was all things tariffs, and it was like hour by hour with new information coming out from the U.S. administration. It was actually quite impressive, the number of apologies that we got. And we actually had one vendor who asked if they could become the 11th province of Canada, which was pretty funny as well. I mean, we recognize the administration, Donald Trump, they don't represent the brands that we're dealing with. The brands that we're dealing with, the people that we're dealing with, they're all good people.
Yes.
They're frustrated like everybody else, but we're just dealing with this unique situation right now. And we all have to figure out how to navigate it. And the good thing that COVID taught us is how to pivot rapidly. And we've been doing a lot of that on an hour by hour basis in some cases based on new information. But yes, as you said, a number of brands have come forward and offered to absorb and or mitigate some of the increase, which is super helpful in terms of their support of the Canadian market and wanting to continue to be competitive. And so in the list that we publish to retailers, we'll actually identify at the SKU level which of these manufacturers / brands have helped in terms of mitigating the tariff increases or counter tariff increases.
Yeah, I would say that as you mentioned, we at Purity were really quick to turn around and making sure that we provide our brands or retailer the support, because this was a true mess. And thankful for your work on that, because we needed definitely somebody with tenacity to look at all the details, because it was so confusing. As you said, every minute, every day, something was changing, new information. And it's not like when you look at a brand, as you mentioned, but I think I want to make clear for people who are watching that it's not like within a brand, it's not necessarily all the SKUs. It's really, so you have to be very detail oriented to make sure that you're hitting the right products.
No, for sure. Absolutely. And we were fortunate and are fortunate that we have a very strong business intelligence system. We use a system called ClickView, and we were able to pull in all the tariff code information, country of origin, country of shipping, and then run all these various scenarios to see where we got these basically hits on matching tariff codes. So we loaded all the tariff codes, and there's 2,300 different tariff codes basically. And then we have to run our data through those 2,300 tariff codes to see if any of our 14,000 SKUs that we have get a match on those tariff codes. And then are they shipping from the U.S.? Is the country of origin the U.S.? And kind of cross-reference all that information on the fly to be able to determine at the SKU level where we believe the impact is, and then correct any of the errors or omissions. And we discovered lots of wrong tariff codes, wrong country of origin or country of shipping, or just not even filled out at all. And so we were able to correct a lot of that information to make sure that we've got the most accurate information to ensure that when we're providing the details to the retailers, they can see and have the transparency at the SKU level and the brand level what's being impacted by the 25% increase. On the other side of it, too, for those that log into our customer link system, we've been very transparent in there, as well as on all the Canadian brand options, too. So if you log in the customer link, you'll see the actual Canadian brands
Yeah, the focus.
highlighted,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, quite nicely there. And so for those retailers that want to make a Canadian recommendation to their consumers, they can quickly see all the
Mm-hmm.
Canadian brands.
Yeah. Yeah. And saying that, definitely we've seen an increase or influx on supporting the Canadian brands. I just want to mention, though, that even if a brand like the American or the US brand, I don't think it's necessarily like we need to switch and turn around and forget the US brand. As we mentioned, many brands want to support. And
Sure.
even Canadian brand might be impacted because their ingredients
That's
come
right.
from the US. So the manufacturing side of things will be also impacted, I believe, right? So,
Yeah, and overlaying on top of all of this is what's happened with the Canadian dollar through this period. So when the tariffs were initially increased, the U.S. administration applied the tariffs initially in February, the Canadian dollar really tanked,
mhm,
and so we were forced to put through an exchange rate increase because of that. And there's been a lot of volatility in the Canadian dollar, which
mhm,
impacts all the distributors that are importing from the U.S. and those that are buying ingredients, all the manufacturers, even the ones in Canada that are buying ingredients that are priced in U.S. dollars because of the devalued Canadian dollar, because of the uncertainty around the tariffs and counter tariffs. So there definitely is going to be an inflationary impact
mhm,
across a whole swath of products,
yeah,
and they're not just the ones from the U.S. It just could
mhm,
be delayed for those that are Canadian because of the reality of exchange and the counter tariffs that are being applied to very specific items. I mean, I highlighted a very few, but it goes a lot across a whole sector and industries as it relates to
yeah.
these counter tariffs. And we've had two waves of these so far. There'll likely be more, but hey, who knows? I mean, information again is highly fluid, is changing all the time, and so
We're just ready.
who knows what tomorrow will bring? But we're ready, and we're being very transparent for our retail partners to understand what the
Mhm.
impact is going to be.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing. I mean, if for those who are watching again, if you have some, we'll have question later on, but uncertainty or you're not certain, like reach out to us. We've definitely become experts on the subject with all the research, and there's always something new to learn. We talked a little bit about the change in the industry, focus on some even consumers looking and supporting more, the Canadian kind of, elbows up kind of um, vibe out there. Do you want to talk a little bit about how Purity wants to, because we bring brands from the US, but what are we doing or what are we going to do to maybe not have our eggs in the same basket, maybe?
Well, it's a great question. I mean, obviously, when we're looking at this situation right now with a weakened Canadian dollar and a 25% tariff being counter tariff, excuse me, being applied to the importation of products, especially those obviously from the U.S., it really makes us look at what our innovation funnel is going to look like or pipeline. And getting products, innovative products from the U.S. right now is challenging because obviously we know that they're going to be a lot more pricey on shelf,
Mhm.
and there's a lot of instability,
Mhm.
uncertainty. And so we are now actually looking to some of the partners that we have around the world. One in particular, we have a partnership with a distributor that's very similar to Purity Life, actually distributes many of the same products that Purity Life
Copy of
distributes.
Purity.
Yeah, it's a copy of Purity or maybe a doppelganger of
Doppelganger.
Purity Life. They're called Unique Health Products. You can look them up online.
Yeah.
And they service health food retailers throughout Australia. Very similar business to us. You and I were lucky enough to go
Yeah.
down there and
Yeah.
meet Dale, the owner, and his team there, and spend time with them and understand what they're doing. And so we're setting up a meet and greet with their vendors.
Speed
That
dating
will,
with the
yeah,
brands.
exactly. Speed dating with the brands in May. There's a show there called Naturally Good. It's kind of like a CHFA, maybe a little smaller, but a CHFA for Australia. And so at that Naturally Good show, we will be holding or hosting this meet and greet with
Mhm.
a number of their vendors to try to see what innovative brands that we can bring to Canada from Australia. They're a friendly Commonwealth partner that aren't going to be impacted by the fluctuations in the U.S. dollar, that aren't going to be impacted by the counter tariffs, but then can continue to allow us to have innovative products to service
Mhm.
our retailers with, so they can continue to grow their business as well.
Yeah, because through the years we've been looking at the US and the Anaheim Expo West show for innovation, and definitely innovation that comes from the US. Usually the Canadian market is a little bit delayed, but we kind of follow them. But Australia actually is like population is very similar to us.
It is, yes.
Outdoor people, and they love natural products. So we've seen when we visited them last year, I think. Yeah, we really connected, and when we looked at the industry, it was very similar. So we kind of put that on hold, but now it's the time, definitely. And they have some very great products. We're very excited to go and meet them and to bring to retailers other options. Definitely, Canadian brands will be always brands that we look for. Again, we're not denying our American or U.S. brand; they're a great partner, but it is important to expand our reach
Hmm.
so we don't have again our eggs in one basket.
Yeah,
So I think that is very exciting, and we'll share some more news when we come back.
that's right.
We didn't talk about supplements. Like right now, the supplements industry, which is very big for us, is not impacted. Do you feel that it's going to go there or?
Well, I think there's certainly a potential for that.
Yeah.
Definitely, I think this is just my personal opinion. I think the government has chosen very selectively which tariff codes to enact for the counter tariffs, and they probably have consciously chosen not to include supplements, sort of this category that could be lumped in with medicines, so to speak.
Mm,
They would certainly have an opportunity to do that, but they haven't yet. And we noticed that on certainly a lot of the items that had NPNs. Now, sun care is different. Sun care does have
yeah.
NPNs, but sun care is definitely impacted by the
Yeah.
counter tariffs. But a lot of the other items that are within supplements that have NPNs, they are definitely not impacted for now. But if things continue to escalate, this is where the going back to that word fluid environment or phrase fluid environment takes uh,
All
or
its own.
has an impact is if they decide that, okay, well, we're not getting much traction on the tariffs from the U.S. being reduced, eliminated, they could decide to ramp things up and apply more counter tariffs in a broader section. They've actually put out a position paper for consultation on additional tariffs. You can actually go on the Government of Canada website, and I looked through that, and it's a very extensive list. There's well over 5,000 different tariff code items on there. It doesn't appear any supplements to be on there right now,
Right.
which is good, but it definitely goes a lot deeper into very specific, I would say more of in the manufacturing componentry side of things.
Okay.
So that's certainly a possibility on supplements, but right now they're not overly impacted. I would say it's really in the health and beauty space, the hair care, sun care, skin care, perfumes, makeup, and then coffee,
Coffee, tea.
tea, spices, napkins, food storage, dental
Hmm.
floss, a few of those kind of items. But it is very SKU specific.
Okay. Is there any advice or caution or something to say to our retailers or vendor partner on how to deal with the tariffs or read between the lines or don't look the other way? Because sometimes when something is that fluid or very complex, we just look the other way. We think it's going to go away, but it's stuck to us. So reading or anything that you would say that is,
Well, I think we all have to be very flexible with the reality that we're dealing with right now, that information is changing rapidly and that we have to stay up to date with what that information is. And so at Purity, we're trying to be very transparent. We're communicating information as it becomes available, like we did in our e-blast, like we're doing with this podcast right now. But
right.
it's highly fluid, as I keep saying that phrase. And so things can change. I think the other important thing is 25%. That's a significant increase. So it's difficult for us as a distributor to absorb that kind of a price increase. I mean, it's just not realistic. We have situations where people say, "Oh, I'm not going to accept a 25% increase." Well, I'm sorry, we can't not
Function
pass it on because
that,
we would not have a sustainable business, and we're employing, over 170 Canadians,
yeah.
and for that for our business to continue to be sustainable, we have to pass these price increases through just because of the magnitude of them. And I think all distributors are going to be in a similar situation. Now, as we talked about already, we are fortunate we have good U.S. partners, and a number of the top brands that are impacted by the tariffs have stepped forward to help mitigate.
That's right.
So for a few of them, not all of them, there won't be the full 25% price increase. It'll be a lot less or less. So that's certainly helpful, but I think it's important for everyone to understand that we have to pass these increases on because of the magnitude of them and the reality that we got to pay them within 30 days of product coming across the border.
That's significant.
Yeah, and so to have a viable business, we have to manage that process very closely and understand the impact. And so we're working hard to do that and being transparent in the process with all of our partners so everyone understands. And as I said, too, it's very important to understand this is just like the first wave of price increase. The second wave comes when second and third wave comes, second wave being those brands that we're not importing but are coming from these warehouses that are in Ontario or wherever in Canada, I should say. That's the next wave of U.S. brand price increases. Then the third wave, and we've started to see this already with some of our own Canadian brands, are the price increases coming from materials that they need to import from the U.S.
The container or goes from China to the U.S. and come here.
Yeah, there's packaging components that are subject to counter tariffs. There's the impact of the weakened Canadian dollar. And so that's like the third wave of price increases. So it's going to be a highly inflationary period, I suspect. I'm no economist, but just the reality of things, 25% increase on these 1,800 plus SKUs just that Purity Life has, let alone all the other distributors. And then the next wave of those that are coming through other warehouses in Canada that are U.S. brands, and the third wave of the components that go into Canadian brands that are going to be impacted by price increases.
Yes, that's a very gray reality, but that's why also we work very closely with the partner to try to mitigate those increase. And I think that it's all of us together that can, go through it and, make it work, because that is the reality. And all those solutions, just like, stores that have a variety of brands, is to, differentiate your mix, bring on, Australian or brands that are out of that so you won't be impacted. Keep your great brands that are from the U.S. that are supporting as well. And there will be also, we were looking even at CHFA coming, where usually the brands would support like a bigger discount. We see some pullback, and that's a reality for all of you to understand, because as you were saying, they too have to pay a portion of those deals. And now they have that tax that they have to give away. So, what's left in anybody's pocket right now is much leaner.
Yes.
So I think we can all win if we all work together. And that's why, again, we took the time today to bring a little bit more clarity and transparency to all of you, and to say that you're not alone in there. We're doing a lot of homework. Matthew has been working really hard to get into the details and nitty-gritty of everything and finding solution to make it work.
Yeah, thank you, Julia. And I should also qualify that statement. It certainly hasn't just been me.
No.
There's a number of us back in the office. Karen Scott is our in-house tariff expert. Natalie and Christine have been working hard on pricing.
Absolutely.
And that's been a big challenge, too, to validate and continually make sure we've got the most accurate list and make sure it's available to our retailers. So all the teams back at Purity Life have been involved, including within the category specialists and Amanda, with just making sure the tariff codes are right and getting vendors to update information. So we have a whole team that are making sure that we can provide retailers the correct information. And I think, as you said, too, it's not all doom and gloom.
No.
We just want to be prepared and communicate the information. We do have a lot of positive things that are in the pipeline with the work that we're going to do in Australia to find more new innovative products. Certainly in this situation, it's going to really facilitate a lot more innovation in Canada. So I think we're going to see more Canadian brands coming with a lot more products to offset the realities of the U.S. And we have our U.S. partners that are good partners that are stepping up to help out. So, if we learned anything from COVID, it's just being flexible, pivoting, and dealing with a new reality, which may change every single day. And then who knows? Maybe the tariffs will, or counter tariffs will stop in a week from now, and then we'll just go on with our lives, and you can focus on growing our sales versus talking about tariffs and counter tariffs. But we'll see.
Absolutely. And my last piece of advice I would say is definitely while you're working on the tariffs, as we are doing, look the other way too, in positive, and create, in-store event for brands. Work with the retailers to help them out, because we can't just focus on the details of the tariffs and forgetting that we need to talk to our consumers as well, because they too are worried, and we need to show them that we have a plan and we continue to have fun out there, because that's very important. So thank you, Matthew.
Thank you.
And we'll turn now if we have some questions.
All right. Yeah, we do have 3 questions for you too. The first one comes from Dennis, and it says, as a manufacturer of NHP products in Canada, do you know if any ingredients besides whey are impacted by the tariffs?
Oh, it's a great question. Your best source is you really have to go onto the Canadian website. I mean, we publish some information as well with all the rounds of counter tariffs in the information that's available to retailers on an Excel spreadsheet that shows. But you have to really search through each of the tariff codes to see what ingredients are impacted. Definitely all things dairy, cheese, whey, milk is impacted, but it's all very, very ingredient and SKU specific. And so you need to really go and pull down those counter tariff lists from the Government of Canada websites, and then basically scour them and see where your tariff codes, when you're importing products, match the counter tariff codes. That's really the only way to do it. It's not as clear to say, oh, it's this category or that category, because it's so SKU specific and item ingredient specific. It's a long list of items, and you have to go through it and try to figure out. But the good thing is you can use ChatGPT, and you can load an Excel spreadsheet in of all the counter tariffs and ask it to do a nice little summary for you to try and be more efficient in the analysis of it. But good question, Dennis. But you got to really do the research at the individual counter tariff level.
Okay, great. Second question is from Randy, and they're asking, what can brands do to bring awareness of their Made in Canada brands to retailers in partnership with Purity Life?
I can answer some of that. So on our website, we do put the Canadian logo. So when retailers go on our website or on the customer link, they will see the logo. Second of all, I would say you can provide to retailers some cue cards that they can put on shelf, like a shelf talker that says that you're Canadian. If you don't have it right now on your packaging, which I highly recommend now, if you're a Canadian brand, put that nice little logo on it, because that's going to speak volume. And even if the tariffs were to go away, I do think that it sort of awaken the Canadian, vibe into, the full Canadian market. So that would be my main advice. So those tools are very important.
Yeah, I know for our retail partners as well, on our customer link website, additional functionality was added to make it easier to search by all the Canadian brands, and then also the SKUs as well. And so it's very easy to go on customer link, see the Canadian brands, search, and decide which ones you want to choose versus others. Thanks, Randy.
Our next question is from Greg, and they are asking, if raw materials come from China, is there a 20% tariff on this and then an additional 25% from the U.S.?
That's a great question. I'll give you a very specific example of what we learned in this process. So we have a brand called Giovanni. It's a hair care brand. They have a number of shampoos, conditioners, gels, but they also have items that are like hair elastics and clips and all that kind of stuff. We import those from the U.S., but the actual country of origin of all those items is China. And so in that example, we actually confirm with our broker, Wilson's, would those products that are actually country of origin China be impacted by the 25%? And the short answer is no. because they're not from the U.S. And so that's why you get into this quagmire of trying to understand country of origin, country of shipping, tariff codes, because you kind of have to have them all line up to really understand what is going to be impacted by the 25%. And you need to work with your customs broker as well to make sure that you understand that. And so we've been fortunate with Wilson's. We've got a good partnership with them that goes way back 20 plus years, and we've been able to ask them a ton of questions, very specific questions on just like the example that you provided. Weleda is another example where Weleda comes to us via Germany through the U.S. And so because country of origin is Germany, we don't have to pay the 25%, even though we're importing it from the U.S. Now, there is a different tariff on Weleda. I think it's 6% or something, but was long in place well before any of this tariff and counter tariff stuff was going on. And so it's very important to understand country of origin, where it's shipping from, and the applicable tariff code to understand if it's going to be hit by the 25%.
Thank you, Greg.
Next question is from Allie. Where is there a list of the U.S. brands that are absorbing some of the tariff costs? I don't see that on the list affected SKUs.
Oh, good question, Allie. We're actually going to be publishing that. I think Amanda's working on that right now. And so when we put out the final list of all the price increases, that'll be an updated link. It'll actually show at the SKU level the brands that have chosen to help our Canadian partners here, our friends from the U.S., to support our Canadian friends and you, the retailer, by mitigating the increases on the tariffs. And so you will see that in the list. It's going to be published very shortly. They're just finalizing it right now.
Okay, and we have one more here. For brands that are not made in Canada, but are also not made in the U.S., will you be highlighting those brands on Customer Link?
We have not yet done those. It's a good question. We understand the Canadian brands, the U.S. brands, and then there's a long tail of other brands with various countries of origin. It's a good point. I mean, that's something that we're looking at trying to update in our own databases so that we can highlight, if you want to search for Australia, Germany, wherever, there's a number of other countries where these brands come from. But right now, we've just focused on the Canadian brands because obviously there's a lot of interest and demand in that area.
Sensitive point.
Yeah, more sensitive point, sure. But that's certainly something we could do because we have the information. We just have to add the various filters. Thank you for that question. It's a good one.
Well, again, thank you, Matthew. We hope that that was insightful for everybody who watched. This is recorded as well, so if you want to watch it again in a couple of days, we'll have the recording going out. And hopefully, tariffs are done and we stick to what we have right now and we can focus on being, getting people healthier with all of our great products. And we'll maybe see you, for some of you, in the next podcast for the Anaheim Trends Talk. We'll see you in a bit.